on the front and on the back, the anatomically correct slipcover. Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Celeste de la Cabra. Welcome back to the channel. It is the return of the Vinegar Syndrome review segment yet again. We're going to be talking about the July titles today. It looks like I got to this one a lot faster than I did for the May titles, and of course we're skipping June because June is partner labels only month. But yeah, thank you all for your patience as always. There are only 4 titles today to talk about as opposed to 5, so hopefully we can get through this one a little bit quicker. But before we get started, if you are at all interested in in-depth discussions on cult and art house films, please click the subscribe button down below. Please leave me lovely comments to read, and leaving a like would also help a lot. There's also a link in the description where you can find my Patreon, where you can get access to exclusive videos, personalized handwritten postcards, and more. So if you would like to support this channel and the work I do, that can be found below, and your support is greatly appreciated. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this first one. We're gonna go ahead and start with GORGO. So there's your front cover, just fine. There's the back. Kind of turns into this. Now with this one, I don't know how much complaining I'm going to do about this, but we are doing this sort of packaging deal that I'm seeing more and more with Vinegar Syndrome, where like there isn't a booklet in here, and whatever paper materials are in here fit inside this guy. So the only reason for the slipcase is to add extra artwork, and in this one I find it especially kind of inexplicable because this, I mean, honestly, this isn't the greatest artwork. I'm sorry, but I mean, really, you're just adding cost and adding space. So it seems a bit superfluous to me. But one thing I do really like about this packaging, I showed this off in a previous video, but I'm going to do it again, because it's neat. This one actually comes with a, let me back up a bit to show you, full-size poster with the artwork that we have on the slip. And then it also has GORGO's anatomy here, which I think is pretty neat. I will just say real quick that I adore this original poster art. I think it's so sick. Just the best. Now, this was advertised to me as the British Godzilla, is kind of how they sold it to people and marketed it, I guess. And after going through the special features, it's clear that this was like a pretty big deal at the time and to a lot of people. Like, I think this got a lot of airplay on like TV stations and stuff like that. Like, a lot of people had said that they remembered this one from their childhood and they were really excited about it. This is probably not the first instance, but it's probably one of the very few instances where Vinegar Syndrome was putting out like films made for and marketed to children. It is kind of a left field pick for them in general, but it's one that I'm pretty happy about, having watched the film. I gotta say, I was kind of expecting just like a silly, fun, giant monster movie. And like, you know, the comparisons to Godzilla I thought kind of probably stopped at the surface level and were really only referring to like the dinosaur-esque giant monster destroying a city. But no, I think that this actually has a lot in common with Godzilla in terms of how thematically rich it is, and how the film is really just using the giant monster to make a deeper point about a larger issue. Godzilla is obviously, you know, if you know anything about it, it's a pretty clear metaphor for the nuclear bomb. And here in GORGO, I think it's very purposeful that the story takes place in London, because I feel that this story is a pretty significant and clear indictment of colonialism, of zoos, and of using animals for entertainment in general, honestly. And the last thing that I sort of feel that this film is about, and sort of is a manifesto for or towards, is animal rights. And I'm sure that that is at least partially my own biases creeping in, but I think, you know, as we get into the special features, we'll find that there is perhaps some evidence to actually back that up. So the film is just essentially about some like shitty like pirate dudes that kind of are looking for treasure to kind of sell to people, and they happen upon this sort of giant creature and they like, their immediate impulse is to turn this creature into like a circus attraction and to monetize it and kind of exploit it for their own like capitalistic gain. And I don't know that I want to say more than that in terms of plot, other than just to say that there are consequences. for these actions. So the film has a rather short runtime. I think it's only around 70 minutes long. The tight runtime is almost never a bad thing, I think, and none of the time is wasted, and I think the pacing is really quite good. One of the main things that I think is going to be immediately obvious to anybody watching this is that the special effects certainly show their age, and I think some of them are really quite good and don't necessarily show the seams around them quite as much, but a lot of this sort of blue screen in-camera effect going on here is really quite noticeable and a bit distracting, and I do think that the 4K transfer only sort of enhances the seams, as it were, and you can definitely see them. They definitely look a little bit more dated. However, I will always be kind of a proponent of practical kind of in-camera effects, even if the flaws were the seams sort of are at the forefront and are more obvious. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that I probably should is that this is a 4K, and the 4K transfer on this is just absolutely stunning. Like, it's clearly a film that shows its age a little bit, and there is a decent amount of grain there, which I like, but really the true star here is the colors. Like, the HDR does an incredible job showcasing just the beauty of this film. The last sort of extended sequence especially is just filled with so many vibrant blues and reds. It's just a real treat, and for anybody who had to grow up with this on VHS in the wrong aspect ratio, like, this is gonna be an absolute delight for sure. This sort of thing is just kind of already up my alley, so I'm probably predisposed to giving it a high score and really praising it, but I think the themes here are just really beautiful. The special effects are great, the practical monster effects are incredible, and just something I never really get tired of. The story is really well written and put together, and again, I won't spoil anything, but this thing really, really sticks the landing, and it's an ending I wasn't expecting, but it's one that I'm so happy about, and I just think really ties it all together thematically, and it's just really beautiful. So I highly recommend GORGO. I'm gonna give this one an 8 out of 10. Big fan, absolutely gonna be keeping this one, and I highly recommend that you pick this up. So there's a shit ton of special features on this thing, so let's kind of talk about those. The first is a commentary with film historian and cartoonist Stephen R. Bissett. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. He's going to show up a few times on this. He might be the biggest fan of GORGO living on this earth. Like, he talks about it for numerous hours on this edition, and it's very obvious that he has like a huge passion for this film in particular, and this story in particular, and especially the comic adaptations that were created after the film came out. I think that that's sort of his expertise and how he kind of I don't remember if he says he found the film first or the comics first, but I think that's the connection for why he was on this disc and why he has so much expertise in this in particular. His commentary is kind of just like a 90, well, not 90, but like 70-minute rapid fire of like trivia facts and like just an insane amount of knowledge, but it's not always like relevant to what's happening on the screen, and it does kind of have the feel of just like listening to somebody like rattle off trivia to you for the entirety of the runtime. This is not to say that it's a bad commentary, just that's sort of the vibe that I got from it. There's an interesting piece that he talks about how this was created for and marketed towards children, but in the UK and in other territories this ended up getting an X rating just because of the violence. And so you kind of had this interesting situation where a film that was made for kids ended up having to be sold to adults, having the X rating. Trying to think of any kind of analogous situation or like what that would even look like today. Like if fucking Pixar tried to make a movie and slipped in some graphic violence, and then fucking the MPAA was like, you're getting an NC-17 for that one. And then the idea that they would just be like, okay, and run with it instead of immediately editing the film. I don't know, it's just a different time and a different place, I guess. Next is a documentary called The Ninth Wonder of the World, The Making of GORGO. This is a really, really great and concise documentary on the production history, the creation of the special effects, and the cultural impact of the film. It's only 30 minutes, and it is really well worth the watch, I think. Like, if I had to recommend one special feature on here, it'd probably be that one, because that's gonna be your most concise viewing experience time-wise, and it kind of packs the most information in one feature. Next is a GORGO behind-the-scenes featurette. This is even more concise and rather repetitive making of thing. One interesting tidbit that I found here is that the star of the film, Bill Travers, and his wife actually started a few more animal rights themed films and actually became animal rights activists. So I felt kind of vindicated learning that after you know, gleaning quite a bit of that from the themes of the film. Another interesting fun fact from that is that despite being filmed in Britain, that was actually one of the last countries that got a release of the film and that it was screened in. Not entirely sure what to do with that information, but I found it interesting. Next is an interview with Stephen Bissett, the guy who did the first commentary. I actually think this interview is better than the commentary. Like, the visuals help a lot when he's just kind of going, like, bouncing around to different pieces of GORGO history and just getting to see his GORGO collection of, like, figures and books and comics and different physical media items and just all sorts of trinkets, as it were. You know, this actually inspired me. I found one of the toys he was showing off. It was a green little GORGO figure, and I found the yellow version of it on eBay for like $10. And I placed a bid on it, up to 15, and somebody outbid me by 50 cents. I was just like, okay. I didn't want it that bad, but it did inspire me to attempt to obtain some kind of GORGO memorabilia. This is probably like cool as fuck for comic fans because he is a comic artist and an expert in this field, and he really goes in depth to the literary adaptations of GORGO. Next is a video gallery and comic book. Well, I guess there are multiple video galleries where it's just kind of like still photographs and then posters, and then it's not one of these things where it's like stills and then you can like flip through it with the remote. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like kind of a virtual gallery, I guess, where it's like taking you through different images and like going from one to the next. The actual like gallery itself is like extremely hard on the eyes, and it's like almost, at least for me, it was extremely difficult to tell what the actual image was of. It was just like a thoroughly unpleasant viewing experience, and I just kind of like fast forwarded through them. And I mean, the comic book is like an hour and a half of just like a camera panning to each panel of a comic book. And I found this extremely baffling, especially since you already have the hardbox packaging, why you wouldn't just license this stuff out as print materials and then people could actually flip through it in a physical book. Really very strange and very unpleasant, and I don't quite understand it, but I guess it's there. Next is a short film from 2010 called Waiting for GORGO. This is about 20 minutes, and it's just kind of a satirical little, like, one set, kind of one location kind of comedy short about a woman who discovers a kind of mystery department of the British government. And she goes to investigate, and it's just two old dudes who have just been spending the last 40 years waiting for GORGO, or making sure he doesn't come back. Like, their task is to make sure that no giant monsters attack the country. It's honestly not as funny as it thinks it is, and it is also just not particularly subtle. Like, it's very obviously like a satire and critique of bureaucracy before our main character just kind of says that. It's not bad. I think it's worth a watch because you might get more out of it than I did, and it is, you know, it has a few chuckle-worthy moments, and it's an interesting idea, I suppose. There's also, finally, I guess the last feature on here is a behind-the-scenes featurette for this short film, which is actually, like, considerably longer than the short film itself. I wouldn't say it's worth watching. It's pretty amateurishly put together and, you know, kind of a rough watch, but it is interesting to kind of fast forward through it and just kind of wrap your mind around the kind of astronomical amount of work it takes to even produce a like super low-key one location 3-actor short film with like no special effects. It's really quite insane how much work went into this thing, when you would think you could just like pull up to a room, set up lights, camera, and sound, and get your actors and say go. It's more involved than that, I guess. And that's GORGO. Overall, highly recommended. Okay, next is Terror at TENKILLER. So there's your front artwork on the slip, the back. I think we said this in our video, but you got titties on the front and ass on the back. The anatomically correct slipcover. And then you have the original poster art, which I actually really love. Like, I would probably hang this on my wall. I think it's pretty neat. And it's just a 2-disc set, one 4K and one Blu-ray. So I've definitely heard mixed reactions to this one. A lot of people really just kind of baffled that this got a 4K at all, because it's so low budget, so obscure, so like deeply regional. And a lot of people who also just really liked it, who kind of got on its wavelength and were vibing with it. I think I'm definitely fall into the latter camp. I didn't like love it, like as a film, but like I'm trying to think of a more intelligent or astute way to put this, but the fact of the matter is it's just kind of a vibe. Like I just kind of got on its wavelength, and I really kind of am coming to enjoy regional horror films because you just kind of get sets, locations, and types of people and all sorts of things that are kind of unique because you're not sort of watching something set in New York or LA or like typical locations or like even like a studio lot or something like that. You know, you get to kind of explore and see like weird little pockets of the Midwest or the South or, you know, more rural areas and stuff like that. In this one, I really loved just the look of the film. It just has this very much like, I mean, it's definitely deeply inspired by Friday the 13th with like the kind of lake house sort of deal. And in terms of its story, it's nothing particularly special, but I do really love the way the 4K looks. It just looks beautiful. I really love all the blues at night and the kind of summer outdoor photography during the day. There's some interesting kill sequences in here, but I think primarily what I found so interesting about this is that there's 2 female lead characters and they really have like a very well developed and dynamic and fleshed out relationship just on their own. Like this fully like passes the Bechdel test and then some, you know. I don't know, there's a lot of time spent like nurturing these 2 people's relationship and getting to know them as people and getting to know them as they relate to each other. And there's definitely like male presences in their lives and in the film, but you know, one of their boyfriends is just like extremely abusive and horrible. And the whole point of the vacation, or at least part of it, is to get away from him, you know? So there's this sort of idea of men as the villain, straight men, like male partners, as like what these characters have to fear on top of, you know, it's kind of hard to get into it without getting into spoilers about like, without identifying the killer and all these things. But it's clear to me that a woman wrote this, and that is indeed the case. The director's wife is the screenwriter on this. And, you know, they mentioned it a few times in the special features. They're like, yeah, you know what? It's really interesting to see these female characters and to see them develop like this in a slasher film. And, like, it's kind of hard to believe that it would have turned out the same way had there not been a woman writing the film. So, yeah, I don't think it's amazing or anything like that, but I'm absolutely going to be keeping it and probably revisiting it in the future. And it feels kind of comfy in a weird way. Typically, that's not something I say about slasher films, but I don't know, this one just has a sort of, it takes its time. You know, there's not a ton of like constant action happening. Like it almost has like a slice of life feel in a few of these sections. And I think it looks so beautiful and it's just kind of a cozy watch for me. I don't know. So I gave the film a 6 out of 10, though it might be closer to a 7 on a rewatch. And I do recommend it, especially if any of the things I've said sound interesting. Although I guess I will put the caveats aside that these are in fact amateur actors and this is low-budget filmmaking, so don't go into it expecting, like, something incredible on a technical level or anything like that. But the director was, leading up to this, like, a professional documentary filmmaker and had his own equipment and everything, so, like, it's made by people who know what they're doing, but there's nothing, like, particularly dazzling happening here. To get into special features, there is a short intro that you don't need to watch. They literally don't tell you anything that you don't already probably know, and it's, like, 30 seconds, so you can skip that. Next is one of the trademark Vinegar Syndrome feature-length making-of documentaries, although this one I believe is only about 30 minutes. It's called 2 Weeks of Terror, in reference to how long it took them to shoot the film, I believe. You know, this one is shorter than they usually are, but it's still a very informative making-of documentary. There's an interesting anecdote about the dubbing, which I think there are conflicting reports on because the director's son, who co-directed and edited and starred in the film, said that the 2 leads actually did dub over their own dialogue. It had to be done as a result of the constant, overwhelming noise of all the insects on the lake, the cicadas and whatnot. But the main lead was the one who was interviewed here, and she said that she had talked to the other lead, and that she had said the same thing. But essentially, they said that when they first saw the film, when it came out on VHS, they were like kind of heartbroken and kind of shocked to hear that it wasn't their voices on the tape and that nobody had invited them to do their own ADR, and they were just kind of taken aback by that, which I agree is kind of whack, but I guess that's just how it shook out, and I guess the editor doesn't remember it happening that way, so... But I feel like they would recognize their own voice, so I kind of believe them, but I don't know, it's interesting. You know, past that, it kind of just goes into the history of the production, and because the director was a documentarian and had his own equipment that they didn't need to rent, they were able to shoot the thing on film, which is partially why it looks so beautiful. But this was kind of in that era of shot on video stuff, where video stores were looking for as many films to stock the shelves as possible, and it was becoming less frequent to see stuff shot on film. The director was also not a horror fan, but he found this was the easiest and most accessible avenue to get to make a feature-length fictional film, and so he kind of just took that opportunity. Next, there is a good amount, like 30 plus minutes worth of behind-the-scenes footage, and there is a commentary. Really, all of this is done by the same two people, the director's son and another star in the film, who both actually play villains in the film, but yeah, they basically did everything here, so their names are going to keep coming up again and again. The behind-the-scenes footage you can probably skip, although it is at least a little more interesting with the commentary turned on. I don't know, it's just not particularly interesting footage, and they don't have a ton to say about it. It is interesting to see scenes shot from different angles and kind of get that behind-the-scenes look at what was going on. Next is a short film that Kevin Meyer, who is the, again, the director's son, this was the only film that he actually directed himself. This was actually a student film that he made that he co-directed with the director of Texas Chainsaw 3, the Leatherface film. This is shockingly like well put together for a student film, and it's honestly quite good. Some of the only problems I had with it, I later found out were like restrictions that were put on by the assignment, I guess, or the professor or whatever. Like there wasn't supposed to be any on-screen dialogue, and so there's a lot of narration that I don't much care for, and there's kind of some awkward, I mean, it's essentially a silent film with narration, and some of the pacing and some of the cuts are a little bit awkward, but it's a beautiful looking film, and there's some really, really cool special effects in it. There's some great music in it, and honestly, all the stuff related to this film is what I found to be the most interesting on here. You know, looking at this film on Letterboxd, it's like nobody has seen it, but when you get into the making of featurette and the commentary and everything, it feels like a shit ton of really important people got to see it, and it actually kickstarted like a lot of people's careers. Like if you watch the end credits, there's going to be a lot of familiar names on there. I don't know, just kind of a hotbed of talent there, strangely. Yeah, the most interesting thing to me about this is that there's a really, really impressive war sequence here, because this is a film about the Civil War. And essentially what they did is they just like hit up a local like Civil War reenactment group, and they were so excited to just be filmed doing what they do already and like get to be in a movie that you got all this like really professional looking equipment and period authentic costumes and everything, and then they just had to like block and shoot and everything, and they got their own like homemade battle out of it, and it looks extremely professional. Now the making of featurette is the one exception here, in that it doesn't feature the two guys that are on everything else, which is weird to me, but it's kind of like another one of these. I think it's a Vinegar Syndrome produced documentary, I think it would have to be, but like it features the co-director. It also features one of the actors from the film that isn't really involved in the rest of the stuff. It's really interesting to me how such a small film, like he still considers to be so powerful to him and like means so much to him. He says that this is the only one-sheet poster of his own films that is framed in his house, which I guess says something. Next we have some behind-the-scenes footage shot for Divided We Fall, which was actually shot by the director of Terror at TENKILLER, who also did the voiceover in the film, which is interesting. This is really fun because it's like this really beautiful like color cinematography that is definitely contrasted with the black and white footage of the actual film. So you get different angles and like an entirely different feel for it since it's in color. And again, there's a commentary track included on that. They were just really down to talk about all this stuff. And next is the commentary for that film. This is really just an incredible commentary. It is just so jam-packed with insight and like just unbelievable anecdotes in such a short runtime. The most insane of those anecdotes to me is that apparently Steven Spielberg saw the film, and on the strength of his performance in this film, cast somebody in The Color Purple. And this is a very small role in the film. Just a lot of actors and crew members in this just went on to have really big careers. And apparently they just had a lot of like really, really insane state-of-the-art equipment, and like they had a, what was it called? It was one of the earliest films to use like tracking shots. Like they said that they popularized it in The Shining, obviously, but like they had it like at the jump, and like this was state-of-the-art shit that they had their hands on. Apparently people in the industry were just like really willing to help young student filmmakers, and they also just had the audacity to walk up to important people and ask, and that was respected. Listening to the director talk about all this stuff, it's so obvious that like he's extremely passionate about this, and also like very knowledgeable and very talented, and it's really, really kind of inexplicable, but also kind of sad to me that Divided We Fall is the only director credit that he has. He never explains why he never went on to make more films, but I don't quite understand it, and you know, I would like to know why, because it's clear that he had a talent for it. He had a lot of connections. He has a good film under his belt with an established director as the co-director. He has this one that he worked on with his dad that is quite good. I don't know. So that's interesting. Overall, I really do highly recommend this release. It is pretty stacked, and there's so much that I learned from it, and so much stuff here that's interesting. I don't know, I really enjoyed this release, and it's stuff like this where I see like new Criterion announcements and I'm just like, Vinegar Syndrome stacked this shit to the nines for Terror at TENKILLER, and we'll get like 2 interviews for like one of the greatest films ever made from Criterion, you know? I don't know, different discussion for a different day, I guess. Okay, next up from Renato Polselli. Did my best. Delirium. Here's this great slip artwork. And I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble for the artwork here. I'll do my best to diplomatically censor it. Delirio Caldo. There's the Italian on the back. And then you get the, this is kind of a reversible slip where you can either display the Italian or the English. And they're great, both artworks. They're both great artworks. And here's this one, which is okay, but I'm glad you at least get reversible art. This is just a single Blu-ray. I love how you have the embossed eyeballs here. I think that's really neat. Okay, so what to say about Delirium? This is a really, really fucking wild and bonkers sort of Italian giallo sexploitation sleaze fest. It's a giallo in all the ways that I like, and also all the ways that I really don't like. I really like the super sleazy elements and the really crazy visual style, like the crazy colors going on and the like really sleazy and creative kills going on. What I don't like so much is the detective story at the heart of it, or that takes up so much of the runtime, but this one really just goes over the top in like making the mystery as confusing as possible. Maybe it's an issue with me, but at a certain point I really had a hard time following what was going on here, towards the end at least. I think I generally get the idea, but it just kind of got all over the place, and just the histrionics kind of elevated, and we got like 10 or 15 minutes of people like screaming each other's names over and over again, and just really weird dream sequences and all sorts of stuff going on here. I gotta say, I don't know how much this film really worked for me personally, but after going through all the special features, I do feel like this is a director I want to keep an eye on and seek out his other works, and I think that this is one that I'll appreciate more on subsequent viewings. For right now, I have it at a 5 out of 10, but it is quite memorable. Like, there's some really crazy kind of sadomasochistic scenes in it, some really wild lesbian scenes that go farther than I was expecting. I don't know, they kind of went for it, and it's pretty fucking nuts, so I'd say it's worth a shot. Maybe seek it out somewhere first to see if it's like something that's on your wavelength, but if you do end up blind buying it, I can at least recommend it for all the features. So let's go ahead and get into all that. First up is a commentary with Eugenio Ercolani, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and my friend Troy Howarth. This is a really excellent, informative, analytical, and accessible commentary. They kind of do a lot of things at once, and it just kind of breezes by, and it's just really easy to listen to. They discuss the style of the film, the careers of the director and the stars, and they also get into some sort of sordid rumors about the director. I guess there have been some stories that have lived on about some of the things he asked of the actresses, or, you know, things of that nature. But they pretty quickly say, like, hey, there's not actually a ton of evidence for this, so it might be irresponsible of us to, like, be talking about it at all, but, like, I guess that stuff is out there. Next is an interview with the screenwriter Ernesto Ernesto Gastaldi. He talks about, this was a kind of entertaining interview. He talks about how like people in his school of screenwriting and filmmaking like kind of all felt really disappointed in their careers because they were stuck making genre films like, you know, giallos and that kind of thing. But they wanted to make like high art Fellini films. But he was just happy to be writing and just to be making money and have a successful career writing. He didn't really care what genre of films he made, just that he could make them was enough. Yeah, he also relays a pretty troubling anecdote about the director, and it's like he kind of laughs about it, so it's unclear to me if this is in jest or like just like a joke that he's telling that like doesn't translate super well. But basically he talks about how the director said that he would cast his wife in a future film if he let him fuck her, and he told him to fuck off, and then they didn't talk for a while. I don't know, these things that I'm hearing are in pretty stark contrast to the next interview I'm going to talk about, where they interview his daughter. This one I think is really, really worth watching. She's just extremely intelligent and has a really great kind of analytical portrait of her father. The first little bit of it just kind of talks about what it was like growing up with him and how he kind of discouraged her and her sisters from going into filmmaking because he didn't know that it was a great environment for them, or he just kind of felt he had bad experiences there. Although I wonder if it was really more so that he put women through the ringer and did some inappropriate things, and he didn't want that happening to his own daughter. That kind of like patriarchal, misogynistic double standard kind of thing. She also goes through her 3 favorite films of his and kind of analyzes them real quick, and also just kind of gives a rundown of his whole career. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that, where like the child of a director just kind of like ranks their movies, but it was really interesting. Next is an interview with his friend Luca Rea. I think that's worth watching. It's relatively short. He kind of analyzes how unique the director's style was, even though there were people who were obviously trying to copy him. And next there is a I think newly unearthed archival interview with actor Mickey Hargitay. I hope I'm saying that right, but he's the lead in this film. It's a pretty in-depth and lengthy interview. I think it's like 36 minutes long, and it's quite interesting. He kind of discusses his history as a bodybuilder and as an actor, and expresses his gratitude for Arnold Schwarzenegger because he kind of made it okay to have a thick accent in Hollywood, and that was something that he was constantly being told to fix or correct or not showcase. He was also married to Jane Mansfield, and when they when they created the biopic of her life, Arnold Schwarzenegger was cast to play him, kind of at his insistence. He said, "That's the only guy who can play me." I thought that was an interesting anecdote. And then there's an archival interview featurette with the director and with Mickey. One thing they talk about that I think is interesting is how the nature of censorship is just sort of the morality of like normative society imposed on art, and how like it's entirely subjective, but also like it's entirely arbitrary what is like okay one day and then like completely not the next, you know, and how it's just kind of antithetical to the principles of art to be like constantly imposing censorship. I thought that was interesting. And then finally we have the alternate American cut, which is just a rip from a VHS. It is in widescreen, which is interesting because it is like a VHS quality rip, I think. But essentially for the American market, they kind of added a beginning and an end. Like they added bookend scenes where essentially our lead character's condition is explained by his trauma as a Vietnam veteran. It's very bizarre and obviously shoehorned in, and I don't care for it. So that's Delirium. I recommend it with caveats. If it sounds like something you'd like, go ahead and pick it up. If not, maybe seek it out somewhere first. And then finally, the last one is Psycho Girls. This is actually the first one that I watched out of this stack, and it was quite a while ago, but I watched the features relatively recently, so hopefully I can say something intelligent about it. But there's your slip artwork. There's the back of it. No, I mean there is reversible, but no like original poster art on this, which is disappointing. There's your features. And this is also just a single Blu-ray. Psycho Girls. Okay, this is one that I have definite mixed thoughts and mixed feelings about, but overall I do really like it. This is just such a kind of bold like mixing of like so many different genres and ideas and styles that some of it works and some of it doesn't. You kind of have like a very Fellini-esque art film mixed with like a really, really sleazy kind of torture porn horror film mixed with a hard-boiled detective story mixed with like a Hitchcock thriller. And you kind of get all of these things at once, but in different sections, and like it definitely is kind of split into like two films where like there's a pretty seismic shift that occurs about halfway through, and then you're kind of thrown into a very different film altogether. I will say I kind of loved the kind of dialed to 11 queer camp sensibilities of a lot of these characters, and a lot of this dialogue is a very like theatrical, like again, campy kind of feel and aesthetic to it. The kill sequences and the makeup effects and the acting and the wild plot twists and the kind of insane like psychological underpinnings and ideas that are thrown in here, I found all extremely entertaining. However, the kind of hard-boiled dialogue that is kind of all over this thing, especially in the first half, is, I think, pretty grating and pretty unlistenable and like cringy in a way that I wasn't sure that I was going to like this film at all for the first bit. And by the end of it, I just kind of accepted it as part of this zany batshit experience, but I will say it's still not something that I particularly care for. But yeah, overall, this is a very queer feeling sort of horror affair. It definitely has this tradition in, or it definitely has a foot in like art house sensibilities, and especially after watching all the features, it's clear that this is a very competent and intelligent filmmaker behind this, and overall I did really like it. I don't know that I would recommend it, but if it sounds interesting to you, if you watch a trailer and think it sounds like something you would enjoy, I don't know, it's another one that I'd recommend with caveats, but I do give the film like a 7 out of 10. I just have to give it props for how balls to the wall it goes, and how many ideas it tries, and how much of it ends up working. So overall, I do really like the film. Getting into the special features, first we have an interview with the director. Oh boy, I'm gonna do my best. Jerry Chikoriti? Ugh. Jerry. We're gonna call him Jerry. He made the film from like literally 10,000 feet of like leftover film. So literally just working with like end strips and shit. Leftovers. This is a leftovers movie. Really interesting. He said he essentially wanted to make a Hitchcock film that turns into Salo. Those influences are very clear, and I think that it actually makes a lot of sense, and it actually kind of works. Like, it is both of those things, and there is a pretty significant shift from one to the other. Next is an interview with the cinematographer and editor Robert Bergman. He said that he felt that the director was like a cinematic genius. Like, they would all go to see the new art films in theaters every week, and while he would just be watching it like, yep, no clue what that was about, they would walk out of the theater and Jerry would just easily, instantly kind of explain it from start to finish and explain the filmmaking techniques and all the themes underlying it and just how it worked and like made sense to him. And then he was just like, oh, you know what, that does make sense. He was confused when he got the script initially because he thought that they were making an art film, to which Jerry said that they were. He ended up creating an ADR suite in his kitchen and his bedroom so that they didn't have to use a real studio when they were, you know, redoing all the lines and stuff. Next was an interview with the art director, Craig Richards. He kept referencing the 12 days of Christmas film school because that's how long the shoot took and just how long they had to just make it happen and learn everything and just fucking do it, you know? He said he purchased all the props and paints for the color palettes in one day and was actually hired for his next project at the premiere of the film, which I thought was neat. And next was an audio interview with historian Paul Karup. I'm not sure why this was an audio interview instead of a visual essay. It's really just a visual essay. I'm not sure who's doing the interviewing. It's just him talking over a static image, but okay. He kind of discusses how this film was made after the big tax shelter boom in Canada, but it does kind of help usher in this era of genre films made specifically for video stores. So there was kind of this initial boom of films being made using Canadian tax benefits because they wanted to have like some kind of cultural export, but then people were using it to make really weird, depraved horror movies, and they were just kind of dialing it back a bit. But then at the advent of the video store, there was once again a demand for weird horror movies, so it just kind of marks an interesting shift in one incentive to the other. And then finally there's an audio commentary with the director and cinematographer. It was really entertaining and insightful, and there was a lot of analysis done on like specific shots and creative decisions. It's kind of everything you could ask for in a director commentary, and one that I would definitely recommend checking out. Looking at Jerry's filmography, he's done a lot of like Hallmarky looking like Christmas movies and just like straight to streaming kind of like, honestly, it kind of looks like garbage, like stuff that I'm not at all interested in and has very bad reception to it, which is kind of a shame because he seems to really know his stuff and like has a lot of art house sensibilities, but like I'm glad that he's still working and like he gets to do what he loves, you know? Anyway, that's Psycho Girls, and with that, that is the July slate. I don't think this video ended up being much shorter, but we'll see once I get it all edited. I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that this was insightful in some way. Please let me know in the comments if you have watched or picked up any of these, or if you plan on watching or picking up any of these, and your thoughts on them. I would greatly appreciate that. There's links in the description for my Patreon, channel membership program, and Amazon wishlist should you like to support this venture monetarily. Should you like to support it non-monetarily, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, and leave me lovely comments to read. There's also links in the description for my Letterboxd, Instagram, and TikTok accounts, should you like to be a little bit more intimate. And with that, I will see you in the next video. Remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our accomplices: Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Deanna Vave, Dustin Putman, Enrique Bernal, George Strang, Julie Humphreys, Nosferatu 1334, Peppa Crab, Ronnie, and Sasha Bobashasaurus. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.
I don't remember what they discussed. Those notes aren't helpful.